Good evening, everyone. Hope all of you are doing well. Fear is a debilitating energy and can truly keep us from living our fullest potential. There are many types of fears. Some aren't as obvious as the fear of snakes or flying. They are subtle and harder to detect, such as the fear of failure, rejection, or loneliness. Today, we are going to dig deep to uncover how to overcome them. Gayatri Naraine runs the Office of Brahma Kumaris at the United Nations in New York since 1980. She has been a student and teacher since the past 40 years. She has also co authored a number of publications. One of them is A Story of Immortality, A Return to Sovereignty. Originally from Guyana, Gayatri now lives in New York, and that's where she's joining us from this evening. So let us all together welcome Sister Gayatri. Good morning, Sister Gayatri.
Wow, good evening. And it's so good to be with all of you in your evening and my morning. It's like I have the rest of the day. My day is just beginning, and you're coming to the twilight of your day, and your night is just beginning. So it's a beautiful time, I suppose, to meet. And I first wanted to thank you all for inviting me into your Zoom room and to share time with you and to share presence with you and to have, like a heart to heart conversation today on this very interesting topic of facing my fears or facing our fears, because I think our fears and our phobias are the same, but they are manifested in ways that are specific to us as individuals, but they are experiences that are shared by the world, particularly at this point of time. And so I want to begin today by looking at this spiritual power to face, because to face is considered one of the spiritual arms that the soul carries around. Arm meaning an arm like this, not armaments. And this power connects, the power to face actually connects to the spiritual heart of the soul. And when that power connects to the spiritual heart of the soul, what gets released from the soul, which I call it as the life force getting released from the soul, would be courage, confidence, a clarity of sorts, and a capacity. One feels like an expansion of the heart, an expansion of that faculty of feelings. And because this is where fear lives in the heart. And that is why it is called a disease of the heart that is curable. So fear is a disease of the heart that's curable. And this power to face connects us to that heart, but particularly to the courage, the confidence, the clarity, and the capacity that that faculty of the spiritual heart has in a very, very empowering way. So when we look at this word to face, actually, it comes from the spiritual underpinnings of being in solitude and being introverted. So the word antarmukh literally means turn your face within, because when you're going to face, you're going to be looking within yourself, and you're going to be looking at yourself, what's going on in my inner world, in a spiritual state of solitude, and by being introverted, not looking at what's going on the outside, so therefore not looking with my two physical eyes, but activating that spiritual eye, that third eye, the eye of the soul with which to look at myself. So when I apply this power to face and I turn my face within, what I'm actually doing is that I'm looking at all the senses that are actually, most of it except for touch, is concentrated on my face. So when we talk about the sense organ and the sense of touch, it's the skin. And of course, the skin is the biggest organ of the body. So that is all over my body. But then when I look at the physical organ of seeing, and I look at the sense of sight, that's in my eyes. It's concentrated there. That's on my face. So I'm turning my looking within and my seeing within. I'm doing both, turning the physical organ as well as the sight, the spiritual sense. Then my ears are also on my face. So I listen and I hear with my ears. So I'm going to turn that within. I'm going to turn listening now to what's going on the inside and hearing what's going on the inside. The nose, the sense with which I smell, the sense of smell, the nose is that organ that does that. So I'm going to now be with smelling that sense of what's going on in my heart, that the fumes, the beautiful fragrance of my feelings and of my thoughts, but also the not so beautiful fragrance that's going on. And then, of course, the tongue, the touch, the taste, sorry, of the tongue. And so that it will taste, the tongue will actually spiritually taste the original flavor of what that soul is. Now, these senses, why it's important when applying that power to face to become introverted and to be focused on what's going on in the inner world, because to face my fears, I'm actually facing the layers of illusions that are covering what is called the truth within me, the authenticity within me, that freedom, freedom comes from an authenticity within the soul. So all of that gets covered with the layers of illusions. And those layers of illusions are usually seen in my personality traits, which we call as sanskaras or as characteristics. But what it is covering up, what those layers of illusions are the symptoms that emerge from the underpinning cause of the fear that is lying within me or the phobia. So to do that, the power of faith, as I will repeat again, I need to connect to the courage that is there in my spiritual heart. I need to have a confidence with which to do it with, because it's my spiritual heart, it's within me. I'm the only one who could actually look at it and understand it and be in touch with it. And I need that confidence. And what I'm doing with the power of faith, I'm building an inner capacity. So all of these qualities are found in the heart of the soul. And when I'm aware that, just as how I'm aware of my thoughts, and there's a lot of classes on the mind and the thoughts that come from the mind and the importance of the mind and the importance of the mindset. I would say in today's world, particularly when we're dealing with fears, that we have to understand the spiritual heart of the soul, and we have to reconnect to that spiritual heart. But of course, the only way I can reconnect to my spiritual heart is the consciousness that I'm in and the awareness, that the states of awareness that emerge from that consciousness. So when I'm in the consciousness of being soul, the states of awareness in relation to my heart and understanding my heart would be very different than if I'm in the consciousness of the body and looking at the physical organ of the heart. Then there would be different states of awareness that would emerge from that. So I was asked to do a meditation at the end, but what I will do for the sake of grounding what I'm saying in an experience, I will integrate the meditation pieces throughout the talk that I'm giving or the sharings that I'm doing. So I'd like to invite you now to do exactly that, to become someone who is in solitude. So I am withdrawing. I am turning my face within. So I'm turning my senses within, and the sense organs are becoming quiet. And I'm connecting to my spiritual heart. The purpose of this spiritual exercise is to get you to connect to this spiritual heart that lives in the soul, this very empowering faculty that is full of so much sense that sometimes it is referred to as the genius of the soul. It's the genius of the heart of the soul. And it is within the heart that transformation occurs. So let's connect to this beautiful space within the soul called the heart. The heart loves silence and solitude. So sit quietly on the seat of the soul in the center of the forehead. Be aware of who you are. You are a being of living light. You are a soul whose inherent virtue is love. Visualize love flowing from the sacred space of the heart of the soul. In the solitude of this space, listen to the sound of silence. Silence is the language of love. Hear the whispers of the heart. See the subtle rhythms of the spiritual heartbeats. Smell the fragrance of pure love emanating from the spiritual heart. Let the feelings of eternal love touch the core of your being. Taste the original flavor of true love. Om Shanti. So now that spiritual practice hopefully has reconnected you to this beautiful faculty, ability that the soul has, which is called the heart. And to know that it exists within me, and to know that it is very present, and it is there waiting to be used, waiting for the individual to have the confidence to reconnect to that courage, because core is heart. So courage comes from that heart in order to deal with its fears. And it needs to first face that. So the power to face the fears will come from the power of the heart. So what is this spiritual heart? Well, how do I understand it further? So living in the intellect, we have three abilities as a soul. We have the mind, which is considered and described as a wild horse, full of energy, but no sense. And so it's a factory. It creates thoughts. It's like a fan. It keeps the air circulating, but it's the same air that is circulating from the space. So that's the mind. It's a factory of thoughts. It's a fan that keeps circulating the same air. Then there's the intellect, and the intellect is the higher level in which it can discern, it can take a decision, it can make choices, it has what is called an embedded conscience, it can remember things, it has the data bank of memories, and then there is the personality or the characteristics, which is called the sanskaras. So this spiritual heart, living in that intellect, is something that is called preet or love. So the spiritual heart actually lives in the intellect in the form of love. So the intellect cannot be an enlightened intellect and make enlightened choices if it is not operated by its spiritual heart, which is love. And so this is why they say the spiritual heart has an intelligence that works as a spiritual faculty of enormous strength. And that enormous strength is called Shakti, that power that comes directly from God. But covering the intellect is something that's called rust, which are layers of illusions that manifest in different forms of symptoms of fears in our lives. So in order to face these fears of illusions, which is what I'm facing, the Maya, the illusions of my fears, I have to cultivate this power of the heart. And the only way to tackle my fears at the level of cause and not to end up fighting with the symptoms is to look for the causes that are lying deep within my spiritual heart. Because remember what I said, fear is a disease of the heart and it is curable. And so originally, if I were to look at my heart, I would see that my heart was filled with love and light and liberty, which is freedom. But what happened to that heart? That it held on to the causes of my fears and phobias and then started manifesting the symptoms, which have gone to such an extent in today's world that those symptoms are being used in a way to bring out the worst in human beings. And so what happened to my heart? As I move along the path of life, I encountered experiences that may have been beyond my understanding and my ability to cope with what was happening at the time. For example, parents or other people that I upheld in my family or in my experiences of life, and I trusted, may have done something to break my trust. And then what was left was afraid to trust again because that trust got violated. So the fear of being violated led me to not trust. Or I may have experienced a natural calamity that left me with a fear of the actual experience that I went through, but more so the deeper fear of the aftermath that occurred as a result of the natural calamity. So that left me with a fear. And maybe that fear was the fear of poverty. Then another example is I may have lost a near and dear one that left me with a deep sense of grief. And then that grief caused me to fear death, but even more than death, to fear becoming sick and having ill health. So I call these as things happening that's beyond my ability to cope with at the time they were happening. But then what happens as a result is that the heart registers a strong feeling. Now, I may think of it, but what's actually motivating the feeling is motivating that thought is the feeling, the strong feeling that got imprinted on my heart. And then the mind went, to it like took advantage of that feeling. And then the mind started creating conclusions and creating self-limiting beliefs. I begin to question my capacity. Maybe I don't have the capacity to trust. Maybe I justify the fear after going through that natural calamity of I can become poor at any time. Everything could be taken away from me. So that uncertainty. So then these self-limiting beliefs get created within the heart of the soul, but those feelings, the mind took advantage of them and created these thought forms that then I use to justify my self-limiting capacity. I would say things like, the world is not safe. And I begin to list all the reasons that the world isn't safe. Or worse still than that, I would say, I'm not lovable. I was the fault that trust was broken. So then I begin to take the blame of it. And again, that is self-limiting. And so these things begin to happen. And then over a period of time, I'm calling them the illusions that created the rust over the love in the heart and the love in the intellect. It started destabilizing my life. And so when this happens, especially when it's repeated, it becomes a very deep characteristic within me that is called a self-limiting characteristic. But more so, it becomes a trauma for me. Because they say fear lives in the heart of the soul, but trauma is in the cells of the body. And so the fear creates the trauma, and the trauma then goes and sits in the body. And so what then gets imprinted with layers of illusions and rust inside of me is a mixture of memories, of feelings, of thoughts, and then thoughts on those feelings. And then it becomes like a tangled web of an inner darkness, as we call it, that seems to take a life of its own. And on a daily basis, if it's not tended to, it can grow bigger, and each time it's triggered, the experience of the fear becomes bigger. And so then my poor heart becomes encumbered. And this is why they say, when someone has blocked arteries, it's because of the stress in their lives, Of course, it's because of dietary ways that would cause it, but most of it is because of the stress, and the stress hardens the cholesterol in the arteries and it causes blockages in the heart. So this is cause, all of this caused the stress. And so then my spiritual heart, first of all, experiences the burdens and the blockages. And it is like, a cloud that blocks the sun. I become, I get sucked into an inner kind of vacuum that is suddenly darkness around me that leads me to depression and to lead me to these other mental illnesses. And so, and these forms actually go and sit in the cells of my body, and I start getting diagnosed with a whole lot of things, but it is not related to my physical body, but it's showing up as anxiety, it's showing up as something that is mentally wrong with me. So, what do? They put me on antidepressants or they put me on opiates, and I get addicted to the painkillers. And so that is what happens, and it's all relating back to fear. So, having set that context of why I think that we have to be clear about fear is a heart disease and it's curable, it's because the causes of the fears are lying in my heart. And that's where I have to go and clean up my heart or clear it away. In looking at this whole thing of fear as well, there are many, many levels of fear. But I think there was someone who was clever enough to say, there must be like 10 phobias that the whole world has, or 6 phobias that the world has. But I know that my time with you was limited. So I thought, I will just maybe take up 3 of them and for us to go through, 1, what is the cause of the fear? 2, how it is caused, what are the symptoms, how do I face it, and the spiritual response to it, because that's where the transformation lies, within the spiritual response. I can't go out there trying to fix every symptom. It won't work that way, but I could look at the cause. And as most of you know, that I am with the United Nations and I represent the Brahma Kumaris there. And then one of the first Sustainable Development Goals is no poverty. And so one of the phobias that has been identified as a cause of fear, actually, is the fear of poverty. And so I've taken it up as a wide brushstroke because I think it's something that's creating a lot of anxiety right now in the world, is to see the breakdown in the economic landscape, which is due to a number of factors. But I think COVID-19 is one of the obvious factors that is showing the breakdown of the economic landscape in people's lives in a very personal way, because they're beginning to lose jobs, they're beginning to have decrease in their paychecks, but they still have to deal with the same bills that are sometimes getting higher. So it's causing that fear is driving. Are we going to be poorer people? Are we going to not get our needs fulfilled, etc.? So the symptoms of this fear of poverty that's caused by the breaking of the economic landscape, it manifests in symptoms as being angry with your past, the things that you should have done and didn't do. There's worry and doubt about your present, and there's anxiety about the future. What is my future going to be like? What's my children's future going to be like? But further than that, what the fear does is that it creates an indecision. You become overcautious and you begin looking at the negative side of life. You also begin to procrastinate, put things off. And it's the depression, it's the oncoming depression that is causing you to procrastinate and put things off. Because why are you putting things off? It's because you're expecting the worst to happen. And so the cause is the fear of poverty. The symptoms are all these things like anxiety, worry, doubt, procrastination, overcaution, always thinking of the negative. But then now we're saying you have to face those fears and you have to look. So you begin again. The understanding of the power to face is that you have to go within and you have to look for sense and meaning inside of the spiritual heart of the soul. So when you face it, what you're going to do is that you're going to explore the treasures within. Because when you're exploring the richness from within yourself, you're actually allowing the richness of your spirit to emerge. But the courage in your heart, knowing that there must be answers and solutions within me. And I have to kind of bring them to the surface. I have to have faith. I have to have a self-confidence that within me, I can emerge these treasures that would lead me to solutions. And I will go in with the awareness of a spiritual principle in order to face these kinds of anxieties and doubts and stuff that are there within me. And that spiritual principle that I would go in with to face my fear of the cause being poverty is whatever I focus my attention on, that's what I'll see and bring into being. I'll see it into being exactly what I'm looking for. And whatever I'm focusing on inside of me, that's what I will get more of in my life. Now, that's a spiritual principle, and it requires us to somehow experiment with that awareness. Is it bringing me a courage that I can face the situation that's going on outside of me without it breaking me? Does it give me the capacity to see things on the outside from different perspectives? Does it give me an insight or an inkling or an intuitive feeling that, this is what you need to do? But in the midst of it all, you do need to integrate your feelings of that certainty with the thoughts of your determination to make it happen. And then, of course, it will attract more. You will get more, situations will change to make things happen for you because that's what you're focusing your attention on. You are using the strength-based approach to dealing with your fears and the symptoms of the fears. So I would say that the spiritual heart at that time, how it will be operating for you as you're facing yourself within and generating the inner treasures to help you determine what quality of behavior you should have, what quality of actions you should be taking. What is your perception from a spiritual perspective on what is going on? In order to do all of that, you need to enter into a space of loving kindness inside of yourself. And in that loving kindness, to find self-compassion and to find self-confidence. What self-compassion does is that it removes the fatigue because sometimes in dealing with our fears, there can be a fatigue within us. And the fatigue in of itself takes away the spirit of regenerating a way of feeling and thinking about something. But when I have self-compassion, what I'm saying is that, I'm exploring the deeper levels of my strength within with a sense of compassion, with a humility, with an attitude of wanting to learn about myself and not going in with the force to control the fear and then to allow a false sense of strength to emerge. But I'm going in with a self-compassion. Self-compassion also decreases, removes that which decreases my capacity to care for myself. So self-compassion opens up a capacity. And then I feel I'm giving myself permission to care for myself, because others can't care for me at this level. So I've got to learn how to do this. And so then one of the beautiful things that happen in facing yourself with some self-compassion or facing your fears is that you see two sides of the coin within you. And you see your vulnerabilities coming from the causes, in this case, of your poverty, your fear of poverty. But you're also seeing the flip side of the vulnerability, which is your strength. So you're seeing both, because what happens in the spiritual heart is that it is able to see both the darkness and the light. It's able to see what you have acquired in terms of illusion and what is original to you. And so what is original to you would be your strengths, and what you have acquired in the form of illusions would be your vulnerabilities. But you have to see both in order to transform. Transformation doesn't happen if you only see one side, but it can only happen if you see both. And what that does further in this exercise is that it uplifts within you a special kindness that you would experience to yourself. You know, sometimes I find it easy to be kind to other, but I'm so mean to myself. I'm so hard on myself. Well, now I have to be kind to myself. So this way of seeing both, with this self-compassion, both the darkness and the light, both the vulnerabilities and the strengths, emerges within me a special kindness that cultivates thoughts and feelings that lead me to a confidence. And that confidence completely dissolves that notion of poverty from within me, because the soul is never poor. The soul is always rich. It's a rich being. But we are not tapping into the potentialities within the heart of the soul, so that then it can be released. And I can see that if I want to be living a rich life of total holistic well-being, and to remove the fear of the uncertainty of poverty, then I must touch into the potentiality of a spiritual richness within. And that requires from within me a spiritual practice. I have the practice here, and later on I can take you through, but I also want to go into another cause of fear and for us to explore it a little bit. And then I will end with one of the spiritual practices. But the spiritual practice to release myself from the cause of poverty and with the symptoms of the fear as a result is a spiritual practice that is called loving kindness. A loving kindness that I apply to my inner being, to my soul. And it just takes you through a series of feelings more than thoughts. You will begin with the thought, but you will take the thought into feeling it and strengthening, cultivating the strength that feeling will emerge out of you. And as a result, a richness that emerges, that gives you the confidence that comes from that courage. But then let's take a look at the second one, which I call criticism. One of the deepest causes of fear in the soul is afraid of being criticized. And we have reached to a point in our lives in which it almost seems like an inbuilt, acquired mechanism that we have created within us that causes these self-limiting opinions about my capacity, my capabilities, my abilities. And so it is a very interesting paradox that I can sometimes live in with this cause of being afraid to be criticized. So within this, the symptoms would show up in a lot of fascinating ways. So the first symptoms of the cause of the fear of being afraid to be criticized is the fear of rejection, the fear of being judged, the fear of failure. But there's also a deeper fear. It's not just afraid of being a failure, but it is afraid of even my success. I may be successful today, but what if I lose it tomorrow? There is that fear. Afraid of what people will say about me, whether I'm rich or whether I'm poor. They would have an opinion about me, and I'm afraid of that. There's a nervousness that we carry around when we're afraid of being criticized. There's a timidity, again, a symptom. We sometimes lose our poise, as they say. Our entire body is burdened. We walk around with bent bodies. We walk around with, lowered eyes. Or we are constantly confronting the world. We're constantly fighting to be seen. Don't you know who I am? Look at my position. So all of this would come onto the cause of being afraid to be criticized. We also carry around this inferiority, superiority complexes. Suddenly, I may be successful, but because I'm so afraid of losing my success, there creeps into me an inability to self-advance. Or I can become very extravagant and I can exaggerate about things. Again, afraid of being criticized. And then further, it could lead me to mental and physical laziness, or the opposite, a hyperactivity that takes away a balance in my life. So, how do I deal with these symptoms and how do I face these symptoms? I, first of all, have got to face the underlying cause and come to the conclusion that all of these symptoms are coming from the root cause of being afraid to be criticized. And so I have to now go again into I have to face it. I have to face that cause and then deal with the symptoms, which I'm calling the illusions. So I need a strengthening thought that will take me to the level of feelings. I need to feel it. And so this is why sometimes we're told, oh, human being, look into the mirror of your heart and free the self from the illusion, the causative, the cause factor of the illusion called fear. So again, it's a disease of the heart and it's curable, but start with the cause. And so I know now when I'm looking into my spiritual heart, that within my spiritual heart, there is this creative art of transforming tensions and stress into spiritual capacity and spiritual resilience. So when I start this journey of healing my heart, the most important thing when I'm, oh man, look, or oh human being, look into the mirror of your heart, I must start that journey not with a dread or with a hesitancy that what am I going to find? I'm so afraid of the pain and the hurt that's lying there in my heart that I'm even afraid to look at the fear that I have. Well, we can face our fears in two ways. We can face it thinking that there's pain and hurt. Okay, let's accept there may be pain and hurt, but I still have to face it. So I can face it in two ways. Remember, now this is where transformation will happen. The heart's ability, the heart's art is this art of transformation. And so let me look at the pain, but I can choose the way, with the power of facing, I can choose the way I want to face my pain. And so I can see my fear of the pain and the hurt that I carry in a transformative way that can bring out the best in me, or I can see the fear of the pain and hurt within me as something that will take me on a downward spiral of blame and of denial, and taking me to parts of myself that are wounded and I don't want to look at. But I still have that choice. And so the courage in the heart connects me to a confidence to make a choice, to go, not to deny the pain, not to live in denial of the pain and hurt that the fear is causing within me. And in this case, say it's the fear of criticism. But to not deny it, but what I can do is that I can deal with it. And the power to face always takes you on the upward spiral. It gives you that strength. It connects you to the generative strength of the heart for you to do that. Because not to deny the fear, but to heal out of it is by tapping into the innate wisdom of the heart. And this requires me to recognize that there's a creativity, a transformative creativity that feelings bring to the soul. And those feelings coming out of my spiritual heart will allow me to transform the way I feel about something, which is a deeper level of transformation than to just how I think about something. Because I could say I transform my thought on it, but if I haven't transformed my feeling, then that feeling will emerge and cancel out that thought with its volcanic force of controlling the thoughts. But if I transform the way I feel about something, then I'm transforming the hurt and the pain, and I'm freeing myself of the fear. So if the spiritual heart can see the darkness and the light, then the soul's ability to discern is a function of a loving intellect that is within the spiritual heart of the soul. And when the intellect operates with this love, this support from the heart of the soul, then it discerns things like, what is fear? Fear is ignorance. What is light? It's the courage to see what is real and true. It would distinguish what I'm hiding and why am I hiding from it? Why am I so afraid of criticism when I have so much within me that I can, offer to the world with that humility. And also, it helps me discern right from wrong. Is it right to do this to myself? Is it right to live in the shadows of my fear? And so the spiritual practice I would ask of us to do is to dance with our fears, and dance our fears to the end of love, and to free ourselves from them with love. And then I won't go into it because now I could see my time is coming to an end. But the third cause of fear, and I would leave this one with you to face and to come up with your spiritual responses, and that's the fear of ill health or of getting sick. And this is what we are facing right now with the present pandemic. And the present pandemic of COVID-19 has served to erupt from within us our deepest fear. And that deepest fear is to be suffering from an ailment that would leave us disabled, dysfunctional, or debilitated. And so even if I don't, and of course, symptoms would be there, Even if I don't have that virus, I never give myself the benefit of the doubt. I'm saying, who knows? I have it. So that's a symptom of fear. And so I then start indulging in a lot of unnecessary experiments with diet. I start looking at all the cleansing programs that I can find online to keep my body clean. But it's an overdoing of it that is sometimes creating a violence against my body, that my body is not able to go through it. Any little thing I have, oh, I'm asymptomatic of the COVID. I have a cough. Oh, I'm suddenly with a temperature. So everything creates a fear in me, and then further, the fear of this is after a period of time in social distancing and in in lockdown, I become so fear and so protective and wanting to feel safe that these very things, what they do, they create a fear in me that I'm unable now to socialize. I'm unable now to be with people because I have the fear that I may pick something up. And so it leaves a kind of a weakness within me of the way, even the conversations I may be having, the conversations would all be around the threatening pandemic of the COVID virus. And I find myself talking about it a lot because what I'm doing is I'm seeking to solicit sympathy from others. And because I'm so afraid of getting it. And so, we have to then know how to face this thing about ill health and the fears that are coming and the trauma it is leaving in my body. So I always recommend a spiritual practice for dealing with such fears of ill health, of becoming debilitated, dysfunctional, and disabled, is to do with the awareness of love in the body, or in the soul, in the heart of the soul, and um, doing a body scan with the awareness of that love. So I'm putting that love, that flowing love, into my whole body. So it's removing not just the fears from the level of my feelings, but it's also removing the fears from the cells, the trauma in the cells of my body. And that is a way to to deal with facing my fears. So, in conclusion, what I'll do as a meditation piece, I'll end with a piece from Daddy Janki. And we lost Daddy Janki at 104 years old this year in March. And, and of course, her words, the wisdom of her words are still ringing in our hearts. Especially one of her favorite things would say to us when she was guiding us through whatever are the fears we had to face, and the solutions that we were looking for inside of the richness of our souls. She would say to us, she would tell us in words, and then she would never conclude by saying, "Did you understand what I said?" She would always conclude with, "Did you understand my bhavana? Did you feel my feelings that lie behind the words?" And we knew once we connected to her bhavana and to her feelings, our choice, the courage, and the confidence to choose freedom had happened, because the choice happened in the moment of connecting to those pure feelings. And there was freedom from the fear. And because she took us to that spiritual heart of our being. And so I will end with a meditation commentary using her words. So I invite you to sit comfortably and with your heart to feel these words. Everything starts with the heart. The heart takes in sorrow, happiness, love, and it harbors feelings. These feelings shape our attitude, our vision, and our awareness. We must clean up our hearts by facing the causes and the symptoms, the feelings and the thoughts. To do this, we need to place a full stop to the waste that comes as a consequence of our fears. We must look at our hearts as a place of truth and cleanliness. With an attitude of gratitude. And with a vision that can see the light and the love. This is a heart that invites the presence of God. In the solitude of this sacred space of my spiritual heart, I can focus lovingly on God as the source of love, of light, and of liberty. God can touch me at any time and draw me into the safety of His love. This elevated relationship protects me and sustains me continuously. And this frees me from all types of fears. Om Shanti. Thank you all for listening, and I'm now open to whatever questions you may have.
Thank you, sister. That was illuminating. Before we start with the question and answers, I would like to ask you, since this month of September is by the United Nations is the Day of Peace, is on the 21st of September, I believe. So is there a message that you would like to share with us on this?
Oh, sure. The United Nations is celebrating its 75th anniversary in this year, 2020. And the Secretary General has called on all citizens of the world, all peoples of the world, to come up with a vision of what they would like their future to be. And so I would invite you all, in celebration of the International Day of Peace, to create your vision of the future by using the 5 P's that are contained in the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. Those 5 P's, I think, set a frame for looking at our future and really thinking and feeling that future into being. And so the first P is, of course, peace. And the second P is partnership. So these 2 P's for me are the P's, peace and partnership, that would be applicable for the foundation of your creating this future vision. Because peace, as the UNESCO Charter says, it is in the minds of peace, it's in the minds of men that wars begin. And so it will be in the minds of men that the defenses of peace have got to be constructed. So if we use peace as fundamental to the human nature, peace and nonviolence, then that would be the spiritual landscape from which I will create my vision of the future. And then partnership will be interpreted to be cooperation from a spiritual perspective, because that's what partnership is all about. It's about cooperating. And we all know that from a spiritual perspective, I cannot cooperate for a common good unless there is the core of love. The love is the glue that would bind us together in order for us to cooperate. So for this celebration of the 21st, the International Day of Peace in September, go to that landscape of peace and nonviolence, using the cooperative way, and then use the other 3 P's to create your vision. The P of prosperity, the P of people, that is the social fabric, and the P of the planet. What would I like my home planet to be? So this is my message to you. Create that vision from your spiritual landscape and then move out using prosperity for your economic landscape, people for your social landscape, and planet for your environmental landscape. And I think the Secretary General would be interested in your vision. So be a visionary. Om Shanti.
Thank you, sister. You have given us today a lot of food for thought. Um, like I said, before we start with the question and answer, I would like to just revise on some points that it touched me today. And definitely I need to look on and work on those points. Firstly, like you said, the power to facing our fears. I think we are, first of all, either in denial that we have a fear or we are fearful of something, or to face our fear, we feel that it's like opening a can of worms that we avoid to do so. So, what you said was very good is that power to face gives us the courage, confidence, clarity, and capacity, these four C's. And that being in solitude or turning ourselves, our face within, is what we need to do. Also, what you said that fear lies in the heart of the soul and that trauma sits in the cells of the body. And you also gave us some subtle examples of fear. Also, the three fears that you shared are right now the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, and the fear of ill health. So, whenever we have this fear, this is what we need to reflect on and we need to work on. But, sister, I would like to ask you, is it also that fear is based on ego or identification with the false self, or a disconnection from our true spiritual nature, which is the more disconnected we are, the more we fear, the more anxiety we experience on daily basis, and the more we connect with our higher self, the more the fear dissolves?
Definitely, absolutely. But I would say that fear is not just connected with ego. Um, I think, but because then it will be the chicken and the egg, to use that example. What came first, the ego or the fear? Um, but I would say that all forms of fears came about as a result of what I call the number one vice, and that is body consciousness. That a fear gets created, or the causes of fear arise out of a false sense of identification. So if I identify, my identity is based on the limitations of what my body represents, and I don't have an understanding of what, who am I as a spiritual being, then of course what gets formed is ego. Why would I have an ego? Because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of something. The cause of my ego is a fear. So what I do is that the mind then uses that feeling of being afraid of something, creates a form around it that what I call limits my understanding of myself based on that fear. And then I create a thought form of an ego, a protective ego is something that protects me from that which I'm afraid of. And so, to answer your question in a simple way, I feel that we have to go back to understanding the distinctions of our real identity, our original identity, which we say as that soul that doesn't have a physical form as an identity, but has a spiritual form as an identity, and that is common to everyone with the same spiritual rights, as opposed to an acquired identity that is based on body consciousness. So I feel body consciousness is the cause of fear that results in the five vices of lust, anger, attachment, ego, and greed. And those five vices would not exist had I not been body conscious, had I not lived in that false identity.
Thank you, sister. Our next question is, can some of our fears stem from our past life? How do we face those since we do not know the reason of those fears?
Um, that's a nice question, because if you believe in rebirth, which I do, of course, I bring what is called my sanskaras with me, my blueprint for birth after birth. So it's a cumulative thing. Sanskaras or personality traits is a cumulative thing. And so, of course, whatever I'm afraid of in my past birth, whatever was the cause of that fear, will be there inside of me, lying dormant until there is a situation that will trigger that sanskara. And then it will manifest, the cause will manifest in the symptoms. So, of course, I bring certain causes of my fears with me in the form of my sanskaras. And then when I am in situations and circumstances of life, those causes get triggered, and then I experience the symptoms of it. So, as is within any living system, there's no beginning and there is no end, as it were, but it's a continuum of life. And so there is this continuum of our fears being triggered by similar situations and circumstances would be present in. But there must come a point, which I think we're in, when we embark on a spiritual path, and this is why many people are now looking for that path. Then we begin to have this shift. And the shift does not happen at the level of the mind. It just doesn't happen at the level of thoughts, but it actually happens at the level of realization. And the level of realization is within my subconscious, because that's where the causes are living, in my subconscious. So this is why when we talk about transformation, it is not just about transformation in the way I think and the way I feel, even though they are important, but it's the way I am aware of myself. What am I aware of inside of me in terms of what's causing certain triggers that I am, being triggered by, and those triggers are in my sanskara. So it is as if I have to, the depth of the work I'm doing when I do the reflective exercises is really to go within those and face those sanskaras with the courage and the strength that I talked about, the confidence that when I now know that I can transform them, and I know how to transform them because I understand, as you would call this higher being within me. I understand my higher self, but more importantly, I understand the method and the practice to transform these deep rooted sanskaras in which the causes of my fear exist.
Thank you, sister. We have a question from YouTube. I'm shuffling between two jobs. One is my professional job, and one is my responsibility of the spiritual path that I have chosen. How do I manage between the two? Because my spiritual responsibility I do not want to, um, I think what the person means to say is that I want to try and keep a balance because my professional job is a big post that I have. So how do I manage the responsibilities between them?
Well, I am sure it's for that person both both aspects of his life's career um, are equally important. And so this is why he's using the word risk, or she, I'm not sure who it is. They're using the word responsibility. And so, you know, this, each word that we use actually has a spiritual bent and a secular meaning. So responsibility from a secular perspective is a word in which I have to deliver, I have to live up to expectations, I have to you know, to balance whatever it is that I have to do, and I have to come out looking as though I am responsible, and that is important for my image. But when I look at responsibility in terms of a spiritual, from a spiritual perspective, it's usually my ability to respond to something. And so if I want to now be a responsible person and I want to start from the foundation from the foundation of that responsibility, where it's coming from, then of course I will look at my ability to respond to the situation I happen to find myself in terms of my secular life and my spiritual life. And usually the ability to respond to that paradox, or that divide that I'm suddenly seeing, how do I live both, is I have to go back and maybe start with who am I always, and can I live a duality in my life? Can I live as two separate persons? Um, um, Me, I am a spiritual being, I am a secular person doing a job, or am I the same person doing both? And so if I am the same person doing both, then the way I will develop my ability to respond will perhaps be more of an integrative rather than balance, because balance is always two sides. But maybe I would look more at the art of integration, at ways that I can integrate both as one living system in relation to who I am. So when I am responding to either side of that of my life, whether it's the spiritual or the secular, I'm going to do it in an integrative manner. It's me who's playing the role of a CEO, and what I'm bringing to the role of the CEO are my spiritual strengths. I'm responding to the challenges by drawing on my spiritual strengths, by drawing on my spiritual wisdom, by drawing on the spiritual powers that I utilize in the way that I would make decisions, in utilize in the way I would give value to time, utilize in the way I would uphold dignity and worth of my fellow human beings as I work with them, my compassionate way of listening to them, my ability to respond not just to their words but to the situations from which they're talking. And so it's the integration I have to look at, and it's the redefinition of this word responsibility to one of having a spiritual capacity that gives me an uplifting ability, a way to uplift people with my ability to respond to that which is going on in my life. And I think that if we look at the level of integration, then I think who am I always in whatever situation I find myself would be an interesting dynamic to work with.
Thank you, sister. We have one last question, which, in my opinion, you have already addressed it, but I shall read it out anyways. Maybe you want to add something. How can we strengthen our spiritual exercise to minimize fear?
As I said, fear is an acquired quality. Fear is not an original quality to the soul. What is an original quality for the soul is courage, is fearlessness. And so what I have to do is to have that awareness of who I am originally. So the first step in strengthening the way I would remove the fear from my life is to look at that part of me that maybe I haven't looked at yet. Who am I originally? Is fear intrinsic to the soul? No. Love is, fearlessness is, courage is, but not that. So I start exploring with an awareness of myself that sees the complete opposite to what fear is. Now, what that may also require is for me, I have to convince myself now. One is that I have the awareness of, this possibility that intrinsic to the soul are these fearless qualities of love, of truth, of joy, of happiness, of purity. All those are called fearless qualities. It gives the soul an inner ability to kick its fears, to free itself from self-limiting opinions and ideas that create fear within, or the causes of fear. So I then may have to experiment with that by reinforcing or reaffirm the faith in who I am, that I am those things. And so these practices, these spiritual practices of reaffirmations of different kinds in relation to myself is extremely important to do, because what I'm doing with these affirmations that serve to remove the sanskaras, or those traits of illusions that are showing up inside of me as fear, is that I am speaking to my subconscious with those affirmations. And when I speak to my subconscious with the affirmations, then it will naturally surface, and then it will take the place of the fears. And so this is why for many people, like even before they get butterflies in their stomachs when they have to give a talk, for instance. And so the fear, they have the knowledge, they have the know-how, they have the information, they're clear about what they want to say. But then suddenly the phobia of, oh my God, what if, the fear of rejection, the fear of being criticized, that surface. And then what you have to do at that time is to reaffirm the confidence and the courage. You have to feel yourself into being that I am going to do this. I have everything that I need to do. I have everything that I need to say. And so you reaffirm the courage to do it by telling yourself your capabilities, by telling yourself that what you're good at. And so you're using these affirmative statements to reaffirm the faith in doing what you know you could do and what you feel is right for you to do at that time. And so this is why they say that these affirmations, what the affirmations do to us, put us in such a domain of confidence that we will always feel that we're speaking from our hearts. That means we're talking from experience and talking in a way people could understand. You're talking to people's hearts. You're always at the right time, in the right place, to do what is right because you're always present in that sense. And these are some beautiful things. You speak from the heart, you're always in the right place at the right time, and you're always knowing that you're an instrument for a higher purpose. So these kinds of affirmations reaffirm a sort of an inner dignity and worth. And once you reclaim your inner dignity and worth, then the fears would go away. But you can't fight with the fears. If you fight with the fears, if you try to analyze the fears, if you try to dissect those fears, then you're filling yourself more with the fears. And then, of course, the self limiting factors become more pronounced and they kind of paralyze you, they cripple you. That's what fear does. So you have to use the opposite, experiment with yourself. And this is why these spiritual practices are important on a consistent basis, not just when I have something big to do, but even the little things in life, you use them to reaffirm that sense of confidence and courage that comes from a heart that's fearless.
Thank you, sister. I think that's what we all need to work on, self affirmation on a daily basis. Like you said, not only when something comes, but we keep reminding ourselves and affirming ourselves is what is going to strengthen us. And what I also believe that will make us feel light. Yeah, sister, would that be right
Yes,
to
it will
say?
lighten your heart because you know what is burdened is not your mind, but it's your heart. And I think that when our spiritual heart, the genius of life lies in the spiritual heart. And when that starts opening, there's nothing to be afraid of. The heart tells us all the time, don't be afraid, aspire for your highest. Dream the impossible dream, those are things of the heart. If the mind stops to think about it, of course, it limits me. I'm self limiting myself. But when my heart soars and I aim for the impossible, to dream that impossible dream, it's a thing of the heart. So, yes, it puts me on a very different platform to live life on.
Thank you once again, sister. Thank you for sharing with us. We have a lot that we need to ponder on. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We will be having another session on the coming Saturday, which is the 12th of September. I have dropped my number in the chat box, so do message me so that I can keep you all posted. Until then, stay safe, stay blessed, and be fearless. Thank you. Thank you, Sister Gayatri. Have a
Jabin, just one thing I want to say before I say goodbye to everyone is that it was a real pleasure meeting you. Um, and so seeing your face, I remember you. And I wanted to say that reconnecting with you has been a wonderful thing for me as well. So thank you very much. And thank you all for those who have been listening. I hope that you took some benefit from it because if there was ever a time in life to be fearless, this is the time. So go for it, face those fears, and give yourself the freedom to live a life that's fearless. Om Shanti.
Thank you, sister. Have a nice day and have a nice weekend.
Thank you.